This is the story of 4 of them. 4 men who helped build one of history's most organized systems of murder, and then escaped into the world it nearly destroyed. Adolf Eichmann did not pull triggers, he signed papers. As the SS officer responsible for coordinating the deportation of European Jews to the extermination camps, Eichmann was less a killer than a logistics manager, and that, historians would later argue, made him more dangerous than most. By 1944, under his direct coordination, hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews were being loaded onto trains and transported to Auschwitz at a rate that strained even the camp's killing capacity. He knew what happened at the end of those journeys. He had visited the camps himself, but Eichmann continued to optimize the process, resolving bottlenecks, negotiating with railway authorities, filing the paperwork of annihilation. When the war ended, Eichmann vanished. He passed through a series of false identities, spent time in a prisoner of war camp under an assumed name, and eventually made contact with a network that would become known as the Ratlines, a loosely organized escape system that moved wanted Nazis out of Europe, often through Italy, often with the knowledge or quiet cooperation of certain Catholic clergy and post-war intelligence services. By 1950, Eichmann was in Argentina, living under the name Ricardo Clement in a modest house in Buenos Aires. He worked at a Mercedes-Benz plant. He raised his family. For nearly a decade, he was invisible, but someone was still looking. Josef Mengele arrived at Auschwitz in May 1943. His title was physician. His function was something else entirely. Standing on the selection ramp as transports arrived, Mengele directed new arrivals left or right with a gesture, toward forced labor or toward the gas chambers. He was known for whistling opera while he worked. He was also known for what happened inside the camp's medical blocks, where he conducted experiments on prisoners, particularly twins and children, without anesthetic, without consent, and without any legitimate scientific purpose. The records of what occurred there form some of the most disturbing documentation of the entire war. When Allied forces approached Auschwitz in January 1945, Mengele fled. He was briefly detained by American forces after the war, but was released. His name was not yet on the primary wanted lists. He disappeared into post-war Germany, then made his way through the same Ratline network that sheltered Eichmann. By 1949, Mengele was in Argentina. By 1959, as Eichmann's capture drew international attention, he moved again, to Paraguay, then Brazil. He spent the next 3 decades drifting between rural farming communities, protected in some cases by local German expatriate networks, perpetually one step ahead of the investigators closing in. He was never caught. In February 1979, Mengele suffered a stroke while swimming near São Paulo and drowned. He was buried under a false name. His remains were identified through forensic examination in 1985 and later confirmed through DNA testing. Klaus Barbie operated differently. Where Eichmann administered from behind a desk and Mengele wore a white coat, Barbie was known for the direct application of violence. As the head of the Gestapo in Lyon, France, between 1942 and 1944, Barbie personally oversaw the torture of resistance members and ordered the deportation of Jewish adults and children, including 77 children from a Jewish children's home in Lisieux, who were sent to Auschwitz in April 1944. None of them survived. After the war, Barbie was recruited by American intelligence services, who found his knowledge of communist networks in Europe more useful than his history-warranted scrutiny. He worked for American counterintelligence until 1951, by which point his wartime record had become a liability. American officials helped him escape to Bolivia, where he lived for decades under the name Klaus Altmann. A French couple, Nazi hunters Beate and Serge Klarsfeld, tracked him down in 1971. It took another 12 years before the Bolivian government expelled him. In 1983, Klaus Barbie was arrested and returned to France. He was tried, convicted of crimes against humanity, and sentenced to life imprisonment. He died in prison in 1991. He was one of the very few who faced a court. Franz Stangl commanded two of the Operation Reinhard death camps, Sobibor and Treblinka. Under his command, an estimated 900,000 people were killed at Treblinka alone. He too escaped through the Ratlines to Brazil, but in 1967, investigator Simon Wiesenthal, himself a Holocaust survivor who had spent decades documenting the fates of war criminals, located him in Sao Paulo. Stangl was extradited to West Germany, tried and convicted of co-responsibility for the murder of 900,000 people. He received a life sentence. He died of heart failure in prison in June 1971, several months after his conviction. What these four men shared was not only guilt for what they had done, it was the confidence, after 1945, that the world had moved on. That justice was a temporary impulse, that distance, time, and false names were enough. For some, they were right. Mengele died free. Thousands of others whose names are still unknown lived out their natural lives beyond accountability's reach. But the work of the Nazi hunters, Wiesenthal, the Klarsfelds, and the teams of investigators who followed, established something important. That the statute of limitations on crimes of this magnitude does not expire with geography or time. That memory, rigorously maintained, is itself a form of pursuit. The trials that did happen mattered, not only for the convicted, but for the record, for the survivors, for the children of the survivors, and for a world that would need, again and again, to be reminded of what systematic evil looks like when it is organized, administered, and signed off on with a pen. The architects of atrocity fled. Some were found. All were remembered, and remembering, in the end, is the one form of justice that cannot be escaped. How many crimes disappear when the perpetrators escape? And how many survive because someone refuses to forget? Let us know what you think below, and subscribe for more untold stories from history.